Liam was the kind of person who always put others first, even when he had little to give. He worked long hours at a local cafe during the day and delivered packages in the evenings, juggling 2 jobs just to keep a roof over his head. Money was tight, but Liam never complained. Instead, he found joy in small things. A warm cup of coffee on a cold morning, a stranger's smile, or the satisfaction of finishing a hard day's work. One chilly afternoon, as Liam walked home from his shift at the cafe, he stopped at a bus stop to rest for a moment. That's when he noticed her. A woman standing alone, fumbling with coins in her hand. She looked frustrated, glancing between the bus approaching and the handful of change in her palm. "Need a token?" Liam asked, stepping closer. The woman looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm fine," she said quickly, though her furrowed brow told a different story. "It's no problem," Liam insisted, pulling a few coins from his pocket. "Here." She hesitated before accepting the money, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Thank you," she murmured. "I'll pay you back someday." Liam waved off her promise with a grin. "Don't worry about it. We've all been there." As the bus pulled away, Liam continued his walk home, not thinking much of the encounter. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd helped wasn't just another struggling commuter. Her name was Victoria, and she was one of the most successful CEOs in the country. But today, dressed in jeans and a simple jacket, she had chosen to step out of her luxurious life and into the shoes of an ordinary person, to remind herself what it felt like to live without privilege. And Liam's simple act of kindness? It stayed with her long after their paths crossed. Victoria watched the bus disappear down the street, her mind replaying the young man's gesture. He hadn't hesitated, just handed over the coins like it was nothing. To him, it probably was nothing more than a small act of kindness. But to Victoria, it meant so much more. She had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, building her empire from scratch. Along the way, she'd earned respect, wealth, and power, but she'd also lost touch with the simplicity of human connection. That's why she decided to take this break, to step away from her penthouse and designer suits and rediscover what life felt like without all the trappings of success. But nothing in her experience could have prepared her for how deeply Liam's kindness would affect her. There had been no judgment in his eyes, no expectation of repayment, just pure generosity. It reminded her of who she used to be before success hardened her edges. Determined not to forget him, Victoria made a mental note of his appearance. His tousled dark hair, warm smile, and the worn jacket that hinted at his financial struggles. She wanted to thank him properly someday, though she wasn't sure how or when their paths might cross again. A week later, fate intervened. Victoria was sitting at a small cafe near the bus stop, sipping tea while reading a book. She had chosen the spot because it seemed like the kind of place ordinary people frequented, not the high-end coffee shops she usually visited. As she turned the page, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Your latte will be ready in just a sec," the voice said cheerfully. Victoria glanced up, and there he was, Liam. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized he worked here. Gathering her courage, she approached the counter when it was her turn to order. "Hey," she said softly, smiling nervously. "Do you remember me? From the bus stop?" Liam looked at her, puzzled for a moment. Then recognition lit up his face. "Oh, yeah, I remember. Did you ever pay me back for that token?" He joked lightly. Victoria laughed. "Not yet, but I'd like to make it up to you somehow. Maybe let me buy you lunch sometime." Liam raised an eyebrow, surprised by her offer. Sure. Why not?" As they exchanged numbers, Victoria felt a spark of excitement. This was her chance to get to know him better, to see if the kindness she'd witnessed that day extended beyond the bus stop. And Liam? He couldn't help but notice how different she seemed from anyone else he'd met. There was something genuine about her, something real. Neither of them knew it yet, but this meeting would change both their lives forever. Over the next few weeks, Liam and Victoria began seeing more of each other. Their first lunch turned into coffee dates, then long walks through the park, and eventually evenings spent talking about everything under the sun. Liam was struck by how easy it was to talk to her. She listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that made him feel valued and understood. He told her about his dreams of starting his own business someday, even though he knew it seemed impossible with his current financial situation. Victoria admired his determination and optimism. Despite his struggles, Liam never complained or blamed anyone for his circumstances. Instead, he focused on what he could control, working hard, staying positive, and helping others whenever he could. For her part, Victoria carefully kept up her disguise as Vicky, an ordinary woman trying to figure out life. She avoided mentioning her job or where she lived, instead steering conversations toward shared interests like books, music, and their favorite childhood memories. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the city skyline, Liam turned to her with a curious smile. "You know," he said, "you're not like anyone I've ever met before." Victoria raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that a good thing?" "It's a great thing," Liam replied earnestly. "You make me want to be better, not because you expect anything from me, but because you believe in me. And that, well, that doesn't happen often." His words caught her off guard, stirring emotions she hadn't felt in years. In her world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, people rarely spoke so openly or honestly. But Liam wore his heart on his sleeve, unafraid to show vulnerability. It was refreshing and deeply attractive. As their friendship deepened, Victoria found herself looking forward to every moment they spent together. Yet, a nagging guilt lingered in the back of her mind. How would Liam react if he discovered who she really was? Would he still see her the same way? For now, though, she pushed those thoughts aside, choosing to focus on the present. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Liam had already changed her life in ways she never expected. As their meetings became more frequent, Liam and Victoria grew closer. They discovered shared passions like a love for classic novels and indie music, and found comfort in each other's company. For Liam, these moments were a much-needed escape from the grind of his daily struggles. For Victoria, they were a reminder of what truly mattered in life: connection, kindness, and authenticity. One afternoon, after finishing her coffee, Victoria asked casually, "What do you want most in life, Liam?" Liam thought for a moment before answering. "I guess I'd like to make a difference somehow. Maybe start my own business that helps people, something small but meaningful. But right now, it feels like just keeping up with rent is hard enough." Victoria nodded, her heart aching at the weight of his responsibilities. "You'll get there," she said firmly. "You're stronger than you think." Her belief in him meant more than she realized. Liam had spent years doubting himself, wondering if he'd ever break free from the cycle of working paycheck to paycheck. But every time Victoria encouraged him, he felt a spark of hope reignite within him. For Victoria, spending time with Liam was eye-opening. She saw how resourceful and resilient he was, qualities she admired deeply. Unlike the people in her high-powered social circle who often relied on wealth and status, Liam's strength came from within. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. Every time Liam opened up about his dreams or fears, she wanted to tell him the truth, that she wasn't just Vicky, an ordinary woman, that she had the means to help him achieve his goals overnight if she chose to. But she didn't. Instead, she continued playing her part, afraid of ruining what they had. One evening, as they strolled through a bustling market, Liam paused in front of a stall selling handmade crafts. He picked up a delicate silver bracelet engraved with tiny stars. "This reminds me of you," he said, smiling shyly. "Bright, even in the dark." Before Victoria could protest, he handed the vendor some cash and slipped the bracelet onto her wrist. "It's not much," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "But I wanted to thank you for believing in me, for being here." Tears welled up in Victoria's eyes as she looked at the bracelet. It wasn't expensive, but it carried so much meaning. No one had ever given her something so thoughtful without expecting anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's perfect." In that moment, she realized she was falling in love with him, not because of what he lacked or what he could offer, but because of who he was. And yet, the secret between them loomed larger than ever as weeks turned into months. The connection between Liam and Victoria grew stronger. What had started as friendship blossomed into something deeper, something neither of them could ignore. Liam found himself thinking about Victoria constantly. Her laugh, her thoughtful questions, the way she lit up when talking about things she cared about. It all drew him in. She wasn't like anyone he'd ever met before. Despite coming from different worlds, they shared a bond that felt real and unshakable. For Victoria, falling for Liam was both exhilarating and terrifying. On one hand, she cherished every moment they spent together. The quiet conversations, the laughter, the way he made her feel seen and valued. On the other hand, she couldn't escape the fear of what would happen if he discovered her secret. Would he feel betrayed? Would he walk away? One crisp autumn evening, they went on a hike to a scenic overlook just outside the city. The air was cool, and the leaves crunched underfoot as they climbed higher. When they reached the top, the view took their breath away. A sea of golden trees stretching toward the horizon, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. "It's beautiful," Liam said softly, his eyes scanning the landscape. Victoria looked at him instead of the view. "Yeah, it is." He glanced at her, catching her gaze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, without thinking, Liam reached out and took her hand. "I've been wanting to do this for a while," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria's heart raced as she intertwined her fingers with his. "Me too," she replied, smiling shyly. They stood there for a while, holding hands and watching the sunset. In that moment, everything else faded away. Their differences, their fears, the secrets between them. All that mattered was the warmth of each other's touch and the promise of something new. Later that night, as they walked back to the city, Liam turned to her. "Vicky, I know we come from different places, but being with you feels right. Like no matter what happens, I can face it, as long as you're by my side." Tears welled up in Victoria's eyes. His words were so sincere, so full of hope. But the weight of her deception pressed heavily on her chest. How could she accept his love when she hadn't been honest with him? Still, she nodded, squeezing his hand. "I feel the same way." That night, as she lay awake in bed, Victoria realized she was in too deep to turn back now. She loved Liam, not because of who he thought she was, but because of who he was. And she knew she had to find a way to make things right. The truth couldn't stay hidden forever. It happened during a charity gala hosted by Victoria's company, a lavish event attended by some of the city's most influential people. Victoria had tried to avoid bringing Liam into her world, knowing how out of place he might feel among the glittering chandeliers, designer gowns, and endless champagne flutes. But fate had other plans. Earlier that day, Liam had mentioned needing extra shifts at work to cover an unexpected expense. Victoria, wanting to help without revealing her identity, suggested casually, "Why don't you swing by the Hilton later? There's a big event there tonight. You might be able to pick up catering cleanup work." Liam agreed, grateful for the tip. He didn't think much of it until he arrived at the venue and saw Victoria standing on stage, dressed in an elegant gown, addressing a crowd of impeccably dressed guests. His jaw dropped as he watched her speak confidently about leadership, philanthropy, and innovation. The woman he knew as Vicky wasn't just successful. She was Victoria Langley, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the country. Heart-pounding, Liam slipped backstage after his shift ended, determined to confront her. When she stepped out of the ballroom into a quiet hallway, he called out softly, "Victoria!" She froze, her eyes widening in shock. "Liam, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he said, his voice trembling with a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" Victoria sighed, lowering her gaze. "I wanted to. I swear I did. But I was scared. Scared you'd see me differently, or worse, that you'd think I only helped you because of my money." Liam shook his head, struggling to process everything. "All this time, you let me believe you were just like me. You acted like we were equals when the whole time, you're—" He gestured vaguely at her gown and surroundings. It doesn't change who I am," Victoria insisted, stepping closer. "I'm still the same person you've gotten to know. The person who cares about you, who believes in you. None of that was fake. But it wasn't real either. Liam shot back, his voice rising. How am I supposed to trust you now? Tears filled Victoria's eyes as she reached for his hand. Please, give me a chance to explain. I never meant to hurt you. Everything I feel for you is genuine. Falling in love with you has been the realest thing I've ever experienced. Liam pulled away, running a hand through his hair. I need time to think. He turned and walked away, leaving Victoria standing alone in the hallway, her heart breaking. For days, Liam avoided Victoria's calls and messages. He needed space to process everything. Her secret, his feelings, and the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. Part of him understood why she had hidden her identity. Another part couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Meanwhile, Victoria was devastated. She replayed their conversation over and over in her mind, wishing she could take back her lies. But more than anything, she wished she could make Liam understand that her love for him wasn't tied to her wealth or status. It was rooted in who he was. Determined not to lose him, Victoria decided to step out of her comfort zone. She began visiting places Liam frequented, the cafe where he worked, the park where they used to walk, even the bus stop where they first met. Each time, she dressed casually, leaving behind the polished facade of her corporate life. One evening, as Liam closed up the cafe, he saw her sitting at a corner table, sipping tea and reading a book. She looked nervous but resolute, her eyes meeting his when he approached. You're persistent, Liam said, his tone softer than before. I'm sorry, Victoria replied immediately. I know I messed up, but I can't let you walk away without trying to fix this. Liam sighed, pulling out a chair to sit across from her. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me the truth? I was scared, she admitted. Scared that you'd see me as untouchable, someone too different from you. I wanted to be Vicky, the person who laughed with you, listened to your dreams, and fell in love with you. Not Victoria, the CEO. Liam looked down at his hands, thinking, it's not just about the lie, he said finally. It's about feeling like maybe I wasn't good enough for the real you. Victoria reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. You are more than enough, Liam. You always have been. My money doesn't define me any more than your job defines you. What matters is how we treat each other, and how much we care. Her words struck a chord deep within him. Slowly, Liam nodded. Okay, he said quietly. But if we're going to do this, no more secrets. No hiding who you are or who I am. Victoria smiled through tears. Deal. With their trust slowly rebuilding, Liam and Victoria began navigating their relationship with open hearts and clear intentions. They made a conscious effort to blend their two worlds, attending charity events together one weekend and enjoying quiet nights in his cozy apartment the next. Victoria introduced Liam to her friends and colleagues, proud to show him off as the incredible person he was. Though some raised eyebrows at their differences, Victoria didn't care. To her, Liam represented everything money couldn't buy: kindness, humility, and unwavering strength. For his part, Liam learned to embrace Victoria's world without feeling overshadowed by it. With her encouragement, he started working on his dream of launching a small business, a community-focused cafe that offered affordable meals and job opportunities for struggling individuals. Victoria supported him every step of the way, using her resources wisely to guide him rather than take over. One evening, as they stood side by side in the newly renovated space of Liam's cafe, Victoria turned to him with a smile. You did it, she said proudly. We did it, Liam corrected, pulling her into a hug. I couldn't have done this without you. Their journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught them both valuable lessons about love, trust, and what truly mattered in life. Wealth and status were fleeting, but connection and shared values lasted forever. As they cut the ribbon to officially open the cafe, surrounded by friends, family, and grateful members of the community, Liam realized something important. Victoria wasn't just the woman who had changed his life. She was his partner in every sense of the word. And Victoria? She finally understood that true success wasn't measured by boardroom achievements or bank accounts. It was found in the love and joy she shared with Liam. Together, They proved that even the most unlikely pairings could create something beautiful when built on honesty, respect, and an unshakable bond.